Welcome to Illicit BL Stories. If you're here for obsession, tension, and feelings that ruin your day, please like, subscribe, and share. Now let's get a little illegal. I stood at the center of the grand ballroom on the 78th floor of the Siam Pinnacle, dressed in a wedding gown. I kept my chin lifted, eyes forward, the way my mother had drilled into me since I was 12. Never let them see you flinch. Tonight I was marrying Bright Ratnawong, the youngest and most feared Enigma to ever inherit a syndicate throne. 31 years old, already called the Ice Emperor by those who feared him and the Devil's Shadow by those who didn't dare speak his name aloud. The marriage would bind two warring families, the fragile Ratnawong Empire and my own crumbling Chayaporn clan, into an alliance no one believed would last past the first full moon. I had been told the terms plainly 3 weeks earlier, in my father's study that smelled of stale whiskey and regret. "You're the price," my father had said, not looking at me. "The only thing they want that we can still give." No one had asked me if I agreed. Omegas of my status rarely got that luxury. Now, standing beneath the ceremonial arch of white orchids and gold ribbon, I watched Bright approach. The man moved like smoke, silent, deliberate, impossible to predict. Black suit, black shirt, black tie. The only color was the faint crimson of a single rose pinned to his lapel, a traditional touch that looked almost mocking on him. His face was carved from marble, high cheekbones, straight nose, mouth a flat line. Eyes so dark they seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it. When he reached me, he offered the slightest incline of his head. Not a bow. Never a bow. Just acknowledgement. The high priest began the chants. Ancient Pali words rolled through the hall, heavy with incense and expectation. I repeated my vows in a voice that did not shake. Bright's voice was low, measured, almost bored. When the priest bound our wrists with the sacred white thread, I felt the heat of Bright's skin for the first time. It startled me, how warm the man was despite the cold reputation. The thread was tied. The alliance was sealed. The guests clapped politely. Champagne flutes clinked. No one cheered too loudly. After the photographs, carefully staged, no smiles, Bright leaned in just enough for his breath to brush my ear. "Congratulations," he murmured, tone flat. "You're officially untouchable." I couldn't tell if it was a promise or a warning. The reception passed in a blur of forced small talk and watchful eyes. I drank nothing stronger than sparkling water. I smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, and tried not to notice how many people stared at me like meat on a butcher's block. Bright never left my side, yet never touched me again after the wrist binding. He stood a precise half-step behind and to the right, a silent sentinel. Whenever someone lingered too long near me, Bright shifted, barely a movement, and the person retreated. By midnight, the last of the guests had been escorted out. The ballroom lights dimmed. Security swept the floors one final time. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom waited at the private entrance. We rode in silence to the Ratnawong family villa in Thonglar, a modern fortress of glass and steel perched on a hill overlooking the Chao Phraya River. The city glittered below like scattered diamonds. The river was a dark ribbon cutting through the night. Inside the villa, the staff had already vanished. Only the soft click of locks followed them. Bright removed his cufflinks with careful movements and set them on the entry console. "Your room is on the east wing. 2nd floor. Everything you need should be there." I stared at him. "My room?" Bright's expression did not change. "Yes." "You're not," I swallowed. "We're married." "We are." Bright's gaze flicked over me once. "The marriage is political. Nothing more is required tonight." Something cold settled in my chest. I had expected indifference. I had not expected to be dismissed so cleanly. I turned away before Bright could see the sting in my eyes. "Good night then." I climbed the floating staircase alone. The east wing bedroom was larger than my entire apartment back in my family's old compound. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Silk sheets the color of moonlight. A balcony that overlooked the glittering river. I stripped off the wedding gown piece by piece, folding it with shaking fingers. I stood in front of the mirror in nothing but black briefs, looking at the body I had always been told was my only value. Pale skin. Slender waist. The faint scent of Omega that no suppressant could ever fully erase. Disposable, I reminded myself. That's all you ever were. I crawled beneath the covers and tried to sleep. Sleep refused him. Around 2 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, measured. They paused outside his door. I sat up, heart thudding. The door did not open. Instead, something strange happened. A voice, low, rough, intimate, slid into his mind like smoke curling under a door. He looked so small under all that silk. like something fragile I'm not allowed to touch. I froze. If I go in there now, I won't stop. I'll pin him to the mattress and bite until he screams my name. Until everyone in this cursed city knows he belongs to me. The voice was unmistakably Bright's. Yet it carried none of the flat calm of the man downstairs. This voice was raw, hungry, desperate. Control. Just control. He doesn't even know what I am yet. If I scare him, if I hurt him. Another thought, softer, almost broken. I've watched him for 3 years. Every banquet, every charity event. Every time his father dragged him out like a trophy. I memorized the way he lowers his lashes when he's uncomfortable. The way his fingers curl when he's trying not to tremble. I pressed a hand to my mouth. I told myself it was strategy. Leverage. But it was never strategy. A long silence in his head, then. He thinks I don't want him. The footsteps retreated. The presence withdrew. I sat in the dark, pulse roaring in my ears, staring at the closed door. Bright had not touched me. Bright had not even entered the room. But Bright had been thinking about me in ways that made the air feel too thick, too hot. And somehow, impossibly, I had heard every word. I lay back against the pillows, heart hammering so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. The Ice Emperor wasn't cold. He was burning alive. And he was terrified of letting anyone see the flames. The first week in the Thongler villa felt like living inside a very beautiful cage. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. The breakfast trays arrived at exactly 7:30 every morning. Fresh mango sticky rice, jasmine tea, a single orchid blossom laid across the linen napkin like an apology. The housekeeping staff moved like ghosts. I never saw the same face twice. The security cameras were discreet, their tiny red lights blinking only when he looked directly at them. Bright was gone most days. He left before dawn in the matte black Maybach, returned after midnight. When their paths crossed, in the marble foyer, on the curved staircase, in the wide glass corridor that overlooked the infinity pool, Bright always offered the same small, polite nod. Good morning. Good evening. Nothing more. I told myself it was fine. Expected even. I was the political bride, the living signature on a peace treaty written in other people's blood. I had my own bedroom, my own walk-in closet already filled with clothes I hadn't chosen, my own credit card with a limit high enough to make my stomach turn. I could order anything. Go anywhere. As long as I stayed within the compound walls. I didn't test those boundaries. Not yet. Instead I watched. I watched Bright eat exactly 3 bites of whatever was served at dinner, then push the plate away. I watched the way Bright's fingers drummed once, only once, against the edge of the dining table whenever I spoke to the staff. I watched the man loosen his tie the second he crossed the threshold each night, as though the silk had been choking him all day. And every night, when the house fell silent, I lay awake waiting for the voice that wasn't really a voice. It came in fragments at first. He smiled at the gardener today. Just a small one. The corner of his mouth lifted 2.7 millimeters. I counted. That shirt is too thin. I can see the shadow of his collarbones. If anyone else saw. He smells like rain and something sweeter. I want to bury my face in his throat and breathe until I drown. The thoughts were never loud. They slipped under the door of my mind like smoke, intimate and unfiltered. Sometimes they were so vivid I could almost feel the phantom brush of fingertips along my jaw. I started keeping a mental tally. Monday, 3 separate thoughts about how my laugh sounded when I spoke to the housekeeper. Tuesday, a sudden violent image of wrapping his hand around the throat of a delivery driver who had looked at me too long while handing over a package. Wednesday, panic. Pure, razor-edged panic when I had gone swimming alone in the rooftop pool at sunset. He's too exposed. The perimeter lights don't cover the east corner. If someone scaled the wall, if they had a rifle. I had climbed out of the water so fast I nearly slipped, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't name. By Friday I was restless. I decided to experiment. That evening I chose one of the outfits from the closet Bright must have ordered. A sheer white silk shirt that tied at the waist, traditional chong kraben in soft charcoal beneath it. The fabric clung when I moved. I left the top 2 buttons undone. When Bright arrived home, later than usual, hair slightly damp from the sudden rain, I was already seated at the long dining table, pretending to read a book on my tablet. Bright paused in the doorway. I didn't look up. I turned a page I hadn't read. The silence stretched. Then inside my head. Fuck. A single word, rough and reverent. That shirt should be illegal. I can see his nips through the silk. He's doing this on purpose. He has to be. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from smiling. Bright cleared his throat. You're eating late. I waited, I said mildly. Figured you might be hungry. Another pause. Bright moved to the table, sat at the opposite end, always the opposite end, and accepted the plate the silent staff member placed before him. We ate in near silence. I let my foot slide forward under the table until the bare arch brushed Bright's ankle. Bright went statue still. Inside my mind, the voice fractured. Don't move. If I touch him now I won't stop at an ankle. I'll drag him across this table and... The thought cut off like someone had slammed a door. Bright stood abruptly. I have calls to make. He left without another word. I stared at the empty chair, pulse thrumming in my throat. I was playing with fire. I liked it. The next morning I pushed further. Bright was in the study, door half open, on a video call with men whose faces I didn't recognize but whose postures screamed danger. I walked past the doorway wearing nothing but loose silk sleep pants and a cropped tank top that ended well above my navel. I paused, pretended to look at a painting on the opposite wall. Bright's voice never faltered on the call. But his thoughts screamed. He's naked from the ribs up. Those pants are hanging so low I can see the cut of his hip bones. He wants me to look. He's begging me to look. I'm going to lose my fucking mind. I turned slowly, met Bright's eyes through the open door. Bright's expression was blank. Perfectly controlled. His pupils were blown wide. I offered the smallest, sweetest smile, then continued walking. Behind me the thoughts tumbled like broken glass. He smiled at me. Directly at me. Like he knows. Like he fucking knows what he's doing to me. I need to get him out of this house before I mark him in the middle of the goddamn hallway. 3 years of waiting and he's going to kill me in 7 days. I made it to the kitchen before my knees threatened to give out. I braced both hands on the marble island, breathing hard. This was dangerous. This was insane. Bright wasn't indifferent. Bright was a volcano pretending to be ice. And I had just discovered I liked volcanoes. That night, for the first time, I didn't wait for the thoughts to come to me. I went looking. I padded barefoot down the hallway toward the west wing, Bright's wing. The door to the master suite was closed but not locked. I pressed my palm to the wood. I didn't knock. I didn't need to. The voice was already there, low and ragged, like a man talking to himself in the dark. He was barefoot again today. His ankles are so delicate. I want to wrap my fingers around them. I want to bite them. I want to leave marks everywhere so no one ever forgets he's mine. He thinks I don't want him. A long, shuddering exhale inside my skull. I want him so badly it's killing me. But if I touch him before he's ready, if I let the Enigma take over, he'll never forgive me. He'll hate me. And I'd rather die than see fear in those eyes when he looks at me. I leaned my forehead against the door. My heart hurt in a way I didn't understand. I turned away before I could do something reckless. Like knock. Like beg. Like ask the Ice Emperor why he was so determined to freeze himself alive rather than burn us both. The second month began with rain. Bangkok drowned in it, gray sheets that turned the Chao Phraya into a swollen, restless thing and made the city lights bleed into long shimmering streaks across every window. I liked the rain. It muffled the world, gave me an excuse to stay inside the villa and pretend the walls weren't watching me. Bright's rules had grown teeth. No leaving the compound after 8 p.m. No visitors without 24-hour notice and background checks. No answering the intercom unless the caller's voice was on the approved list. 2 new bodyguards appeared every morning, silent men in dark suits who stood at the gates like statues carved from obsidian. I hated it. I hated the way the house felt smaller every day. I hated the way the staff now knocked twice before entering any room I occupied. Most of all, I hated the polite, impenetrable wall Bright had rebuilt between us after that night I'd stood outside his bedroom door. We still shared meals. We still exchanged the bare minimum of words. But Bright no longer lingered in doorways. He no longer let his gaze drift below my collarbones. And the thoughts, when they came, were quieter. Tighter. Like a man speaking through clenched teeth. He's angry. Good. Better angry than afraid. If he knew how close I came to breaking that night. Keep the distance. Keep the distance. Keep the fucking distance. I decided I was done being polite. The annual Lotus Charity Gala was held at the Mandarin Oriental, one of the few events both syndicates still attended together. Neutral ground. Black tie. Cameras everywhere. The perfect place to remind everyone the alliance was alive. Bright had tried to cancel my invitation. I'll represent both families, he'd said over breakfast, voice flat as river stone. You can stay here. I'd looked up from my coffee, smiled sweetly and said, no. Bright's jaw had ticked. What? Then he'd simply nodded and left the table. We arrived together in the Maybach, pulled up under the porte-cochere while valets in white gloves opened doors and photographers flashed like summer lightning. I wore midnight blue silk, high-necked but sleeveless, the fabric clinging to my shoulders and waist like liquid shadow. A thin silver chain rested against my throat, the only jewelry I'd allowed myself. I looked expensive. Dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with weapons. Bright looked lethal. Black velvet dinner jacket. No tie. The top button of his shirt undone. A single blood-red rose in his lapel, the same crimson as the one he'd worn at the wedding. We walked the red carpet side by side, never touching. Inside the ballroom, crystal and orchids and money collided in a glittering haze. I felt every pair of eyes slide over me like fingers testing merchandise. Bright stayed close. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to kill. Halfway through the cocktail hour, a man approached. Denin Vorovut, third son of the Vorovut syndicate, the same family that had tried to poison the alliance 6 months before the wedding. Tall. Handsome in the careless way of men who'd never had to earn anything. He smiled with too many teeth. Art hit Chayaporn, he drawled, voice honey over broken glass. The jewel of the new alliance. May I have this dance? I felt the air shift. Bright didn't move. Didn't speak. But inside my head his voice went supernova. Touch him and I'll tear your spine out through your mouth. He's smiling at him. Why is he smiling at him? I will burn this hotel down brick by brick if he puts one finger on what's mine. I tilted my head, let my lashes drop just enough to look coy. I'd be delighted. I placed my hand in Thanin's. The second our fingers touched, Bright's thoughts fractured into something feral. What? He's letting another man hold his hand. He's letting another man. Control. Breathe. Not here. Not in front of witnesses. I let Thanin lead me onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a slow waltz. Thanin's hand settled low on my waist, too low. His thumb brushed the silk over the small of my back. Bright's mind screamed. I'm going to kill him. Slowly. I'm going to peel the skin from his fingers one by one and make him watch while I feed them to the river. A shiver crawled up my spine, not fear. Something darker. Hotter. I glanced over Thanin's shoulder. Bright stood at the edge of the dance floor, glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. Expression blank. Eyes blacker than the night outside. Our gazes locked. I smiled, slow, deliberate, wicked. Then I stepped closer to Thanin. Let my body sway just a fraction more than necessary. Bright's glass cracked. Not loudly. Just a hairline fracture spidering up the side. The thoughts came in a rush, jagged and breathless. He's doing this on purpose. He knows exactly what he's doing. He wants to see how far he can push before I snap. God help me, I'm going to let him. The song ended. Thanin bowed with exaggerated flourish. Until next time, little jewel. He walked away. I didn't move. Bright crossed the floor in 5 strides. He didn't touch me. He simply leaned in, mouth close enough to my ear that his breath ghosted over my skin. Enough, he said. Quiet. Deadly calm. I turned my face just enough that our cheeks nearly brushed. Jealous? I whispered. Bright's pupils flared. Then he stepped back. Offered his arm. Time to leave. We rode home in silence. The rain had thickened into a monsoon roar against the car windows. When we stepped into the villa foyer, I turned to face him. You didn't have to break the glass. Bright removed his cufflinks with careful precision. Set them on the console. I didn't break it. You cracked it. A muscle jumped in Bright's jaw. I took one step closer. You were thinking about killing him. Bright went still. I kept going. You were thinking about tearing his hands off for touching me. Bright closed his eyes. Just for a second. When he opened them again, they were molten. How long have you been listening? He asked, voice rough as gravel. I lifted my chin. Since our wedding night. Silence stretched between us like a live wire. Bright exhaled through his nose. And you decided to play with it. I decided to find out why my husband treats me like I'm made of glass. Bright laughed once, short, bitter. Because if I don't, he said, I'll shatter you. He turned away. Started up the stairs. I called after him. Then why do you let me push? Bright paused on the 3rd step. Didn't turn around. Because I'm weak, he said quietly. And you're the only thing I've ever wanted more than control. Then he continued upward, footsteps echoing in the dark. I stood alone in the foyer, heart hammering against my ribs, rain drumming on the glass roof overhead. I wasn't a prisoner. I wasn't a pawn. I was the match. And Bright was the gasoline. The first attack came at dawn on a Tuesday. I slipped out before sunrise, against every new rule Bright had carved into our life, driven by a restless need to breathe air that didn't taste of marble and surveillance. I told the night guard I was only going to the small temple at the edge of the property, a quiet wooden pavilion with a single golden Buddha and lotus ponds. 5 minutes. 10 at most. I made it halfway across the garden path before the world exploded. A black SUV roared through the service gate, a gate that should have been locked and guarded. Tires screamed. Doors flew open. 4 men in balaclavas spilled out, moving with the practiced speed of professionals. One raised a suppressed pistol. Another held zip ties and a black hood. I froze for half a heartbeat. Then instinct took over. I dropped, rolled behind the nearest stone lantern and ran. Shouts. Footsteps. A bullet chipped the marble beside my head. I sprinted toward the main house, lungs burning, bare feet slapping wet grass. The rain from the night before had left everything slick. I slipped once, caught myself on a low branch, kept running. Behind me, gunfire cracked. Sharp, controlled bursts. Then silence. When I burst through the side entrance, panting, soaked in dew and terror, Bright was already there. Black shirt unbuttoned, hair wild, Glock 19 in his right hand still smoking at the muzzle. He didn't speak. He simply stepped forward, grabbed me by the upper arms, and pulled me against his chest so hard the breath left my lungs in a rush. For 3 full seconds neither of us moved. Then Bright's thoughts crashed into my mind like a tidal wave. They touched the gate. They got inside. They almost took him. If I had been 30 seconds later, I would have torn this city apart with my bare hands. He's shaking. He's shaking in my arms and it's my fault. Bright released me abruptly as though burned and stepped back. Upstairs, he ordered, voice hoarse. Now. I obeyed. The house went into lockdown. Triple the guards. Motion sensors activated across every inch of the perimeter. Bulletproof shutters lowered over the lower floor windows. Bright disappeared into the war room on the 3rd floor, screens, maps, encrypted calls, for 18 hours straight. I paced my bedroom like a trapped animal. I heard everything. Voravat money. Voravat men. Danon's signature all over the tactical pattern. I should have killed him at the gala. I should have snapped his neck on the dance floor and called it an accident. He ran barefoot. He could have been cut. He could have been shot. He could be gone. He's never going to forgive me for locking him in. That last thought hurt more than the rest. When Bright finally emerged, 2 nights later, eyes bloodshot, knuckles raw from where he'd punched something hard, I was waiting in the hallway. You can't keep me in a box, I said quietly. Bright stopped. Looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. I can, he answered. And I will. Until every last one of them is ash. That's not living. That's surviving. I stepped closer. I'm not afraid of them. You should be. I'm more afraid of you shutting me out. Bright laughed, a short, broken sound. You don't understand what I am. Then show me. Bright stared at me for a long moment. Then he reached out, slowly, carefully, and brushed the pad of his thumb along the fresh scrape on my cheekbone from my fall in the garden. The touch was feather light. The thoughts behind it were not. I want to lick this wound. I want to taste his fear and his courage in every drop of him. I want to mark him so deep no one will ever dare look at him again. But I won't. Not like this. Not when he's still trembling from what they almost did. Bright dropped his hand. Tomorrow, he said. You come with me. Where? To see what happens when people try to take what's mine. The next evening, under a sky the color of bruised plums, Bright drove us to an abandoned warehouse in the industrial sprawl of Lat Krabang. Rain hammered the tin roof like gunfire. Inside the air smelled of rust and diesel and fear. 7 men knelt in the center of the concrete floor, hands zip-tied behind them, mouths taped. The same men from the SUV. The same balaclavas now pulled down around their necks, revealing bruised, swollen faces. Bright walked forward slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You thought you could walk into my home, he said. You thought you could put hands on my husband. One of the men tried to speak behind the tape. It came out as a muffled whine. Bright crouched in front of him. You were wrong. He stood again. Turned to me. This is what I am, he said simply. Then he gave a small nod to the shadows. 2 of his lieutenants stepped forward. What happened next was quick. And final. I didn't look away. When it was over, the rain had washed the blood toward the drains in thin red rivers. Bright walked back to me, boots leaving wet prints. He stopped a meter away. Are you afraid of me now? He asked. I searched his face. No. Bright's jaw tightened. Why not? Because the man who just did that, I gestured toward the bodies, Is the same man who held me for 3 seconds like I was the only thing keeping him alive. The same man who cracked a whiskey glass rather than break someone's neck in a ballroom full of witnesses. Bright exhaled roughly. You're insane. Maybe. I stepped forward until we were almost touching. But I'm not running. Bright closed his eyes. Inside my mind the voice was quiet. Almost reverent. He stayed. He watched. He's not afraid of the monster. He's looking at the monster like he wants to climb inside its ribcage and sleep there. Bright opened his eyes again. They were softer than I'd ever seen them. Come home, he said. It wasn't an order this time. It was a plea. I reached out, slowly, and slipped my fingers through his. Bright didn't pull away. He squeezed once. Then we walked out into the rain together. Behind us the warehouse burned. In front of us the city waited, still dangerous, still hungry. But for the first time I didn't feel like prey. I felt like the reason the predator was willing to bleed. The compound felt different after the warehouse fire. Not safer, never safer, but quieter. The kind of quiet that comes after a scream finally dies. Guards still patrolled the perimeter in doubled shifts. Drones hummed overhead at night like mechanical insects. But the air inside the villa had changed. Thicker. Warmer. As though something long frozen was beginning to thaw. I noticed it in the small things. Bright no longer sat at the far end of the dining table. He chose the chair beside me now, close enough that our elbows brushed when we reached for the same serving dish. He no longer left the room the second the last bite was swallowed. Sometimes he lingered, staring at the rain-streaked windows while I pretended to scroll through my phone. The thoughts still came, but they were gentler now. Less jagged. He ate 3 helpings of the cow soy tonight. His cheeks are fuller than they were last month. Good. He's not wasting away anymore. When he laughs at the stupid cat videos, the sound goes straight through my sternum. I want to bottle it. Keep it somewhere safe. He's looking at me again. Not testing. Not provoking. Just looking. Like he's trying to memorize me the way I memorized him. I stopped pushing. I stopped wearing the sheer shirts, stopped brushing against Bright accidentally in hallways. I wanted him to come to me without the excuse of provocation. Wanted to know what Bright would do when there was no game left to play. The answer came on a Thursday night, after another narrow escape. We'd been at the Grand Palace for a private cultural reception, another performance of unity for the syndicates. Halfway through the traditional con dance, someone slipped a note into my palm while passing me a glass of mocktail. The jewel shines brightest when it's alone. Soon. I showed it to Bright immediately. Within 15 minutes we were in the Maybach, tires screaming as we tore through the old city streets. Bright drove with both hands white-knuckled on the wheel, jaw set so hard I could see the muscle jump every time we hit a red light. We made it home unscathed. But something in Bright had cracked open. He didn't speak in the foyer. Didn't speak on the stairs. Didn't speak until we reached the door of the master suite, Bright's suite, the one I had never entered. Bright stopped, turned, looked at me with eyes that were no longer black voids but burning coals. You could have died tonight, he said. Voice low. Rough. Again. I didn't. But you could have. Bright stepped closer. And every time I think about that possibility, something inside me wants to lock every door, weld every window, chain you to this house until the world forgets your name. I held his gaze. Then why don't you? Because I'm trying, Bright's voice broke. I'm trying so fucking hard not to become the monster they already think I am. Not to you. Silence. Then quieter. Enigmas don't feel things the way other people do. Everything is more. Love is a wildfire. Jealousy is a blade in the ribs. Fear? He swallowed. Fear is drowning every second you're not touching the one person who matters. My throat tightened. I kept my distance because if I let myself touch you, really touch you, I was afraid I'd never stop. That I'd mark you before you were ready. That I'd hurt you. Break you. Make you hate me. Bright's hands flexed at his sides as though he didn't trust them. I've spent 3 years watching you from shadows. Memorizing every expression. Every sigh. Every time you bit your lip when you were nervous. I told myself it was strategy. Control. But it was obsession. And I was terrified that if you ever saw the real size of it, you'd run. I took one step forward. Then another. Until the toes of our shoes touched. I'm not running, I whispered. Bright exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. I lifted my hand slowly. Pressed my palm to the center of his chest. The heartbeat beneath was thunder. I'm not afraid of the fire, I said. I want to feel it. Bright closed his eyes. Then he moved. Not rough. Not violent. Devastatingly tender. He cupped my face with both hands, thumbs stroking along my cheekbones like he was handling something priceless. When our mouths met, it was slow, achingly slow, like the first sip of water after a lifetime in the desert. Bright kissed like a man confessing. Soft presses. Lingering. A quiet, reverent exploration that made my knees threaten to give out. When we parted, Bright rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted this since the night I first saw you," he murmured. "Since you walked into that banquet hall in that ridiculous green suit your father forced you to wear and looked like you wanted to disappear into the wallpaper." I laughed softly against his mouth. "You remember that?" "I remember everything." We kissed again. Deeper this time. Hungrier. But still careful. Bright's hand slid to my waist, lifting me effortlessly onto the edge of the dresser just inside the doorway. I wrapped my legs around his hips, pulling him closer until there was no space left between us. Clothes came off slowly, reverently. Bright kissed every new inch of skin he uncovered, collarbone, sternum, the soft dip beneath my ribs, like he was mapping territory he'd only dreamed of claiming. When we finally fell onto the bed, it wasn't a claiming. It was a surrender. Bright moved above me with heartbreaking gentleness, whispering Thai endearments against my throat, my jaw, the shell of my ear. Every movement was measured. Every touch worshipful. I clung to him, nails digging into broad shoulders, tears slipping into his hairline, not from pain but from the overwhelming tenderness of it all. When we came it was quiet. A shared, shuddering breath. Afterward, Bright didn't pull away. He gathered me against his chest, one arm locked around my waist, the other hand carding through my damp hair. I listened. The thoughts were still there but they were different now. Open. Unafraid. He's here. In my arms. Breathing. Alive. Mine. Not because of instinct. Not because of politics. Because he chose me. I pressed a kiss to the hollow of Bright's throat. Then quietly. "I'm going to stop listening on purpose." Bright went still. "Why?" "Because I want to trust you without needing to peek inside your head. I want you to tell me things. Show me things. Not because I can hear them, but because you want me to know." Bright exhaled shakily. Then he tilted my chin up. "Deal?" he whispered. He kissed me again, slow, lingering, full of promise. And for the first time since the wedding night, I fell asleep without waiting for the voice in my head. Because the man holding me was finally speaking out loud. The city exhaled. For the first time in months, Bangkok felt like it could breathe again. The rival families had fractured, Vorovut's inner circle scattered after the warehouse fire, their remaining lieutenants quietly surrendering assets or disappearing into neighboring countries. Bright's network moved with surgical precision. Deals renegotiated, territories redrawn, old grudges buried under concrete and cash. The alliance between Ratnawong and Chayapur no longer needed threats to hold. It held because no one wanted to test what happened when it broke. I walked the villa's rooftop garden at dusk, barefoot on cool stone tiles, the last of the monsoon rain still dripping from the frangipani leaves. Bright found me there, leaning against the railing, watching the river turn molten gold under the setting sun. "You're out here alone," Bright said, voice low but without the old edge of panic. I turned, smiled. "I'm not alone anymore." Bright stepped closer. No hesitation now. He slipped an arm around my waist, pulling me gently against his side. We stood like that for long minutes, the city humming below us, alive and dangerous in ours. The thoughts still came sometimes, soft, unbidden, like a lover's murmur in the dark, but I no longer chased them. Bright had kept his promise. The mental walls were down, not because I demanded it but because he wanted them gone. Tonight, though, the thoughts were different. He's glowing. The sunset looks better on his skin than anywhere else in this city. I never thought I'd get to keep something this beautiful. He chose me. Not the title. Not the power. Me. I laughed softly. "You're thinking out loud again." Bright pressed a kiss to my temple. Habit. We had spent the last weeks rebuilding in small, deliberate ways. Quiet dinners that stretched past midnight. Late-night drives through empty streets, windows down, city wind in our hair. Afternoons in hidden temple gardens where Bright would sit cross-legged on stone steps while I sketched the lotus ponds on my tablet. Nights tangled in silk sheets, no rush, no fear, just skin and breath and whispered promises. I had learned the shape of Bright's scars. The thin silver line along his left ribs from a knife fight at 19, the burn mark on his inner forearm from protecting a younger cousin years ago. Bright had learned the places I liked to be touched, slow strokes down my spine, fingertips tracing the sensitive skin behind my ears, kisses pressed to the pulse point at my throat until I trembled. We were learning each other the old-fashioned way. No more eavesdropping. No more games. just truth. One evening, as rain pattered against the bedroom windows, Bright asked, "Do you want it?" I knew exactly what he meant. The mark. The permanent claim of an enigma. Teeth at the base of the neck, bond sealed in blood and instinct and choice. It wasn't required for our marriage. It wasn't even expected. Most political unions never carried the mark. It was too intimate, too final. I rolled onto my side, facing him in the dim light. "I want it," I said simply. "But only if it's because you love me. Not because your instincts are screaming. Not because the city needs to see proof." Bright's hand came up, cupping my cheek. "I've loved you since the night you walked into that first banquet and looked like you'd rather be anywhere else. I loved you when you were still a stranger I watched from across crowded rooms. I loved you when you tested me, when you ran from danger, when you stood in a warehouse and watched me become the thing I feared most, and didn't flinch." He brushed his thumb across my lower lip. "I want to mark you because I choose you. Every day. Every hour. Until the day I stop breathing." My eyes stung. "Then do it." We prepared the way tradition demanded, blended with the private rituals only the two of us understood. A small pavilion in the garden at midnight. White orchids strung across bamboo arches. Incense curling through the humid air, sandalwood and jasmine. No witnesses. No guards. Just us, the river and the stars. Bright wore black silk. I wore white, simple, flowing, the same shade as the moon. We knelt facing each other on a low platform cushioned with lotus petals. Bright took my hands. "I, Bright Ratnawong, offer you my name, my protection, my heart, and every violent thing inside me that has ever wanted to keep you safe." I swallowed, voice steady. "I, Arthit Chayaporn, offer you my trust, my future, my softness, and every reckless thing inside me that wants to stay." Bright leaned in. The bite was slow. Deliberate. Not the savage claim of instinct, but the tender press of devotion. Pain flared, sharp, bright, then melted into heat, into belonging, into something so profound I felt it echo in my bones. When Bright pulled back, the mark was there, two perfect crescent indents already blooming red against pale skin. I touched it with trembling fingers. Bright kissed the wound gently, then kissed my mouth, tasting of salt and promise. We stayed like that until the sky began to lighten. Two silhouettes against the fading stars, bound not by politics, not by blood, but by choice. Later, back in our bed, I curled against Bright's chest, listening to the steady thunder of his heart. "No more cages," I murmured. "No more cages," Bright agreed. He pressed a kiss to the fresh mark. Just us. Outside, Bangkok glittered on, neon and shadows, danger and beauty, empires rising and falling in the dark. Inside, two men slept tangled together, no longer arranged, no longer pawns. Chosen. Marked. Oh. Hi lovely viewers, if you watched to the end, please don't forget to like, subscribe and share. Thank you.